This is the Aunty M Brain Tumours talk show. It's a show full of informative chat and inspirational messages. The Aunty M Brain Tumours talk show on podcast. Hello, welcome to Aunty M Brain Tumours talk show. I'm your host Claire, and we've got an important mission this month. It is Brain Tumour Awareness Month, and we're shedding light on a crucial issue. Brain tumours claim more lives among children and adults under 40 than any other cancer. Shockingly, only 1% of the national spend on cancer research is allocated to this silent threat. Thank you very much for coming to share your experience and also just be a part of Brain Tumour Awareness Month. Mel, take us back to when you were first diagnosed. Tell us the symptoms that you had that led up to your diagnosis.
Yeah, definitely. So I was diagnosed on the 19th of December 2022. And I'll be honest, I was ill for quite a few months prior to that. I started presenting with headaches in September. So I went to my opticians at first, and they said I wasn't suffering with anything to do with my eyes. My eyes looked fine. And if I was suffering with headaches, I was to go to the doctors. So off I went to the doctors, and they told me I was diagnosed with a sinus infection back in September. And I finished the medication, and then I had to go back to the doctors because I was still feeling rubbish. On my second trip to the doctors, I was diagnosed with migraines, and I was put on to migraine medication. And a few days after this, I was given a blood test, which came back high in prolactin. And because of this, they booked me in for another blood test just to see if the levels had changed, whether it was just a fluke or something like that, because sometimes they can be high from what you've ate or like stuff like that. So because it's a hormone, so it can be different depending on the weather, basically.
Yeah.
And my second blood test came back normal, but because of how high my levels were on the first one and with the symptoms that I was presenting with, my doctor booked me in for a provisional MRI. But as soon as I came off the phone to the doctor, the first thing I done was took to Google, and I Googled high prolactin levels. And the first thing it comes up with is a brain tumour.
Oh.
So at this point, I said to myself, okay, I'm getting these symptoms, this is happening, I've had this for so long. And at this point, because I wouldn't necessarily say that they weren't listening to me, I think the doctors just couldn't really understand what was going on, especially because at the time I was only 22, I don't smoke, I don't really drink, I'm extremely active. I think it was the last thing on everyone's mind. So once I'd done some research myself and started putting two and two together, I said to myself, oh my God, I have a brain tumour. And I remember going into work the next day, and I said to my friends, and I was like, I think I've got a brain tumour, guys. And they were like, nah, don't be stupid, like, you'll be fine. We'll get to the bottom of it and stuff like this. But I started to lose my vision, and that's when I really started to worry. But I filled out another e-consult and told the doctors I was losing my vision, and they said they'd get back to me within 2 weeks. Within the time of me filling out that e-consult and the doctors getting back to me, I went on holiday for 5 days to Lanzarote. But I think at this point, I didn't really think much else of it. If anything, I thought I was just burnt out. I was working in schools at the time. I'd started a second job. I was at university. Like, I was coaching karate 3 times a week as well. I was just super busy. So I just went on holiday, thought, you know what, I can't deal with this anymore. Christmas is around the corner. I just need to let loose for a few days and go on holiday. So I did, and I came back, and the doctors rang me when I got back home, and they said if I was losing my vision, I needed to go and see an ophthalmologist. And I then started to present with this symptom of having pain right in the back of my right ear, behind my earlobe. And they said if I had a pain behind my ear, I was to up my migraine medication. So I thought, okay, within the hour after I came off that phone call, I was seen by an ophthalmologist, and they took one look at my eyes and said there was something there. They weren't too certain on what it was without having a scan, and I needed to go and get a scan right away. So I then went to Arrow Park and had a CT scan. I was left in A&E for a few hours, and at about 12 o'clock I was seen by a doctor, so we're talking about midnight now. And after I'd seen the doctor, she said, there's no easy way to tell you. You do have a brain tumour. There's an ambulance outside waiting to take you to the Walton Centre. You're nil by mouth and potentially going straight into surgery. So all of that happened on the 19th of December.
Wow. Were you on your own when that happened?
So I was in Arrow with my mum, like getting the scan. And then they told me that because I was losing my vision, that's why I ended up there.
Yeah.
And when I got to Arrow and before I had the scan, they looked at my eyes and retested them up there. And they said, oh, you're not going home tonight. You're going to need someone to bring your bag up. And we're going to do some more visual field tests tomorrow. We can't do any more today or tonight because I had drops in my eyes. So they needed the drops to sort themselves out before they carried on with other tests. So I was just sat in the waiting room and I was laughing with my mum and joking and stuff like that. And I think at that point, for me, it was like a nervous thing because, first of all, I knew I wasn't going home that night and I'd never spent a night in hospital. I've never broke a bone. I've always been really lucky with stuff like that. So I think it was just nerves about staying in a hospital for one, and then nerves of what the scan was going to come back as to why I was being so jolly. So when I actually got diagnosed, I was on a bed then. My dad has brought a bag up and I said to my mum and dad, I was like, look, it's like 12:30 in the morning. I was like, go home. I was like, I'm on a bed. I'm settled. If I hear anything, I'll let you know. So my mum and dad left and I was on my own. I'll be honest, when I was on my own, I did feel quite anxious because I thought, I've got no idea what's going on. Did he turn the lights out? Do I just have to go to sleep? I had so many questions and I just didn't have anyone to ask because obviously A&E is such a busy place. And then lo and behold, 10 minutes after my mum and dad left, who walks in? The doctor.
Oh.
And she said to me, she was like, oh, where are your mum and dad? I was like, oh, they've gone home. They'll be back in the morning. And she was like, can you ring them up? They need to come back. She was like, they need to come back now. So I rang my mum. And my mum being my mum was like, oh, I've just got in. I just put the heating on and boiled the kettle. And she was like, I'm going to bed. She was like, you're not wait. And I was like, no, mum. I was like, the doctor and the nurse are stood here literally waiting for you to come. But where we live, the hospital that I was in at the time is about 25-minute drive from our house. My mum and dad got back in the car and I think my dad must have literally flew because he got there in 10 minutes.
Well, they would have been so worried, yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken to them about that since and they've said the whole time on the drive to the hospital, no one said two words to each other because they were just thinking about what it potentially could be. So then when they got there, they told me about moving hospitals and getting blue lighted over to Liverpool. And my dad, I don't know how he done it, but he drove the van over to Liverpool, and then me and my mum went in the ambulance and we met my dad there. Because otherwise my mum and dad wouldn't have had a way to get home from Liverpool. But yeah, it was just crazy. And I remember I was diagnosed and the first three things that I thought was, I'm going to die. And then the second one was, I don't know anybody else my age that has had cancer, has experienced cancer personally, or it's just not something that you talk about, especially at such a young age.
Yeah.
Like the only time that people my age or similar to my age might talk about it is if somebody in their family gets diagnosed with it. But even then, it's just like I don't know, my auntie's been diagnosed with such, and you just mention it and talk about it and just like gloss over it.
Yeah. No, trying to process that is really not easy. So you've had to go and have the surgery on the 23rd, which was right at Christmas. Thanks for my Christmas present.
Literally. But it's quite funny because the day I had surgery was the day that I was booked in for that provisional MRI by the doctors. But I think if I'd have had the MRI that day, I wouldn't have been seen until after Christmas. When I got to the Walton Centre and they looked at my scans and they took it to a team meeting and they looked at everything else and weighed it all up, they said to me on the Thursday night when the consultant came to see me, he said, oh, just so he was like, this is your scan, this is what I think it is. I don't think it's cancerous, I think it's benign. And he was just talking about it as if it was like his bread and butter. And
yeah, you should know what he's talking about.
Yeah, no, 100%. But obviously, because me and my family had never experienced anything like that, my dad was a bit like, oh, I don't know if I trust him. But then as we were going on through the conversation, he was like, no, he's just talking about it like that because he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what to do. He knows he's the man, do you know what I mean? I remember signing the forms that night because the consultant turned around to me and he said, oh, just so I've got the full picture, how did you end up in here? And I said, oh, I got my eyes tested. And he went off, looked at my eyes, and then he came back literally about 5-10 minutes later, and he said, I've just looked at your eye scans. He said, I didn't realise how bad the vision loss was. He said, because of that, he said, we're going in first thing in the morning. So my surgery date was originally planned for the 30th of December, but it got moved to the 23rd because of how chronic my vision loss was getting.
Yeah. They've gone in and taken you to have, a craniotomy. Did your vision, did it improve in any way, or actually it's just stayed and hasn't got any worse?
I've been quite lucky with my vision, really. When I woke up after the surgery, the first thing I'd done was obviously open my eyes, but the first thing I'd done was wiggled my fingers and toes. Because I remember before I went into surgery, he said there could be a chance that I could lose the use of some of my limbs if they have a little nick or something like that. And obviously that's just something that they have to disclose and tell you about and stuff. But that was the first thing that I'd done. And then the second thing that I'd done was I looked at the clock on the wall and I knew that if I could see the clock, I knew that my vision would be okay. And I looked at the clock, and before I went into the hospital, the surgery, when I'd look at the clock, it was really like wavy and like it looked like there was like double figures in it rather than just, it was like a shadow almost over the clock. And when I looked at the clock, I could see it perfectly. And it was really bizarre because I literally felt like a mirror. For the first 3-4 weeks after surgery, I could hold a conversation and look at someone, but after about 2-3 minutes, everything would blur again. So I'd have to look away, but that was probably down to the hydrocephalus after the surgery and just letting everything settle back down and stuff like that. But my vision now is absolutely fine. There's no sign of hydrocephalus anymore, and everything's settled down great. So if anything, I'm really lucky in that sense that my vision has gone back to normal almost.
Did you have any problems from the surgery?
So I think it's something quite a long time to get back to, I call it like a new normal. And I think, to be honest, I'm still trying to work on that. But I think more than anything, it was like really bad short-term memory loss. And I think that I'm still a bit like that now. I don't know if that's just the brain tumour or the ADHD. But originally I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember conversations. I'd stop halfway through and I'd be like really confused and I'd be like wondering where I am and stuff like that. But as time's gone on and things have settled down and I've started getting myself back on track, it's definitely helped having a routine again. So I think more than anything, it was just the shock of it all and how quick it all happened. But I think I'm actually so lucky because I haven't had any long-term effects almost from the surgery. So I have been really lucky in that sense. I've recovered really well.
Yeah. Did you lose your license?
I did. So
did you get it back?
Go on. Oh, only just. The night that the consultant came to see me on the Thursday, he was like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But he said, oh, you can't drive for 6 months. And I was like, 6 months? Okay, I can do that. Like, it's going to be a long 6 months, but I also won't need to go anywhere in the next 6 months. I'll probably just be at home and like getting everything back to normal. June came and I rang the DVLA and I was like, oh, I'm just waiting for my license to come back. I have this. You've had an email off the psychologist and X, Y, and Z. I'm just chasing it up to see like where I am in the system. I've reapplied for it and everything like that. And he was like, oh yeah, let me just look. And then he was like, oh yeah, I can see it's on the system, it's on its way, like it'll be with you shortly.
That
And
must
I was
have
like,
been a relief.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So that was in June of 2023. July, August, September, October, nothing.
Ugh.
So
I
what's
hear
going
that a
on?
lot. I think people do have to wait a lot longer than they think they're going to have to wait for their license. They
Oh,
don't throw it back at you. They like, for some reason, they just drip it out and you're like, oh, for goodness sake, just give me my license back.
literally, like, I don't have any seizures. I'm not on any medication. Like, I've recovered incredibly well, to be honest. And I will be, like, forever indebted to the NHS, but that's a different thing entirely. But when I hadn't heard anything by October, my consultant turned around and he was like, oh, I can sign you off under Section 88. And he was like, you'll be able to drive them. I was to wait for your license to come through. So I was like, bingo. Letter came through the post. Had a little celebratory drink. Started looking at cars. 2 days later, I got a letter through the post off the DVLA telling me that my license had been revoked.
Oh.
And I was like, hang on, I'm supposed to be driving now. Like, why has it been revoked? So I got in touch with them. They told me to reapply, fill out another medical, and go down all these different roads. And I did. And then nothing happened. And I heard nothing from them. And then just before Christmas, I got another letter off them. Basically, it was another medical form which they wanted me to fill in again. So I filled in this medical form and reapplied for my license 5 times and heard nothing back. So when I rang them in January, I was like, oh, I'm just like chasing this up. I reapplied for it and I'm just wondering like where it is now. It's holding me back from going to work and all this. They were like, oh yeah, it's been revoked. And I said, it shouldn't have been revoked because I surrendered it. And then they were like, oh no. And they kept like listing all these like excuses and like kind of reasons that they almost didn't want me to get it back. I was just thinking, this is so frustrating. I feel like I'm getting absolutely nowhere.
I do hear this a lot. Yeah, this happens a lot. It's like you feel like I lost my license, but I because of my eyes. But I know many other people who it took ages to get their, like almost a year longer than they were meant to get their license. But once you get it, you get it. But it is that kind of getting it back is not easy. It's really frustrating.
100%. The doctors, the hospital and the medics and stuff told me 6 months, and it took me 14 months to get my license back.
Yeah.
So after I spoke to DVLA on the phone, they were like, oh, just apply again. And I literally said to them, I was like, I'm not applying again. I was like, you've had it, I've tracked it, I know you've received it, like, just sort it out. I'm not filling in another form because it's just more stress and it's just not worth the hassle anymore. And I said to myself, I'm never going to get it back. And I kind of accepted that, and I thought, I couldn't accept the diagnosis at first, but I thought it's happened and I've got to accept it. So I then done the same with my driving license and just said to myself, I've lost it. It was no fault of my own. I'm never going to see it again. If I do, happy days, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. A week later, my license came back in the post.
Oh, fantastic. Has that been the worst part for you, your independence? Was like the first, the worst thing for you?
Yeah. Probably, yeah, because before I was diagnosed, I was in my own house. I had my own car. I was self-employed, and I had a really nice life for a 22-year-old. And I was like going abroad and working. I was self-employed back in the UK. Like, I was living my best life. And I think as I was getting iller, my mum was like, I was saying that my mum and dad's more, and in the end, my mum was like, should we just like sell the house? And I was like, I don't want to sell my house. I love it and I've made it my own and all the rest of it. But I couldn't keep it up anymore because I was off sick. I wasn't getting paid with being self-employment, and then I was struggling to carry on paying for things. So in the end, I did just sell it because I didn't know how ill I was going to be. And luckily enough, I did sell it and it sold quick, and I moved back home, and thankfully I did, because being self-employed, obviously I wasn't entitled to sick pay. So I ended up going on the employment and support allowance, which would not have been enough at all for me to stay in my own house, unfortunately. Yeah. But my family have been like really supportive, and my friends have, and I think if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be. I think I'd probably be struggling or still be in bed and stressing about it all and just putting my head under the pillow and hoping that things disappear. But you have to just accept it and move on.
I think sometimes you think like, hey, I've done the worst bit. I've had the surgery. They've said I'm fine. But then you have all these things that have these ramifications that have come all about it. Yeah. And then they actually, it almost makes it worse after. You feel like, whoa, everything's very difficult to get things back to as close as you can get it to how you were living before. Yeah. And it does feel like if you have had a successful surgery and you are right on the right path of getting a lot better, it does feel like it's the after bit that can be incredibly stressful, and it just makes things even worse because it's like, whoa, I want my identity back, I want my life back, I want to be able to be an adult, not have to lean on people as much.
100%. But the thing is as well, like we were saying before, we were both diagnosed very young, and I think because there's a massive almost stigma around cancer and young people and chemotherapy and radiotherapy or surgeries or whatever path of treatment that people go down or whatever, I think it's also harder to then get back on track, like we say. But when I said to my friends I was having brain surgery, they were like, oh, crazy, you'll be fine. And I was fine. And I think for them looking out, like them looking in on me, I think they probably thought that the surgery was the hardest part about it. But if anything, I think that was the easiest part because
you just sleep.
It was through, it was nothing to do with me. I was in the hands of the God.
Yeah.
And then it's after that then I have to put the work in. But I don't think people realise that. And I think some people just think, oh, you've had your treatment now, you're fine. Like, no, I'm not. This is when the work starts. The work doesn't start on the operating table. That's nothing to do with me. It starts after, when I've woke up. And I think some people don't understand that unless they've been through it. And I do think it is attached to that stigma of young people having cancer. And I think people just think that, oh, once you've had your surgery or your sound, you can like go back to work, you can come out drinking every weekend and you can just go back to being a normal young person. But actually it's like the complete opposite. No, it's completely different. But I do think that stuff like that still needs to be addressed within society because otherwise it's never going to change. And yeah, it's quite sad really.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's difficult. It's really difficult. When this first happened, you were going to go to university and then you deferred. So what is that the time when you came out? You just took off that year and then went back again afterwards?
Yeah, so I was studying a degree in sport fitness and coaching at the Open University. And I started that in 2019. So 2022 would have been like my fourth year, if I'm right in saying so. And I was loving it, and I was always like getting things in on time and stuff like that. And then between September to December of 2022, when I was like ill and going through all these tests and doing loads of different things, I struggled to obviously keep up with the work and the deadlines and all the rest of it. And then obviously when I was diagnosed, I explained it to the uni and they were great, to be fair. But yeah, so I deferred my fourth year and I picked it back up again in October of last year. So I took about 10 months out. But I thought I need to get back to it. I thought if I don't get back into it, I'm never going to get back into it. I'm over halfway now, so I think I just need to stick it out and hope for the best and just get it done now, I think, yeah.
So you started ticking off the boxes now slowly. It's job tick. Have you been able to move out to your own home again now?
No, so I'm still living at home.
So that's the next box. So you've done the license tick. You've done the job tick. Studying, so right next is home. You can tick that last box.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So when is it then you decided I want to get involved in helping raise awareness and do some fundraising for brain tumours?
Oh, crikey. It was quite early on, actually. I think when I was diagnosed, the night I was diagnosed, I thought, I am the only person that's got a brain tumour at 22 in the entire world. But I think when you do get diagnosed, you do feel like that because you haven't necessarily heard of other people, or it's not something that you think would happen to you at such a young age and everything else. And I think when you are, like, your world just like starts shutting down and things change, and it's gave me a massive different outlook on life, which I am grateful for, and I wouldn't change, because sometimes people ask me, do I think it's better to get cancer when you're younger or when you're older? To be honest, I don't really know the answer to that, but I think getting it younger is a good thing, but at the same time, it's also a bad thing, because then you're living your life with the fear of reoccurrence. But at the same time, you need to learn to not live your life like that and know that we only have one life. And I'm grateful to still be here and be able to raise money and do podcasts and everything else in between. And I just think that's the beauty of life, that it is so short. And if you are blessed with a second chance, then grab it and do whatever you can.
So I think,
so I think the fundraising for me came in to, more than anything, just raise awareness of it. Like, it's the biggest cancer killer for people under the age of 40. And I say that to a lot of people nowadays, and they look at me as if I've got two heads, and they're like, what, really? Oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, I know you didn't know that, that's why I said it, but at the same time, it's shocking that people don't know stuff like this, and it needs to be spoke about more. And I remember we were out for my mum's birthday last year, literally less than 2 weeks after surgery. I was discharged on the 28th of December, and it's my mum's birthday on like the 14th of Jan. So we went out somewhere around there. So it was very close to having the operation. And I remember I was just thinking about it, and I stumbled across the Brain Tumour Charity, and I'd seen this thing they were advertising called the Twilight Walk. And I had to look into it, and it was down in London, and I thought, there's no way I'm getting down to London at the minute, do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then it was like, oh, organise your own Twilight Walk. And I was like,
I can
okay. So yeah. So I had to look into it, and I thought, you know what? I thought, I'm going to do this. And then I was speaking to my dad about it, and he was like, are you sure? He was like, it's very early date. I was like, oh, it's not until March. I was like, it's only January now. He was like, you've just had brain surgery. I was like, oh, I know, I'll be fine. So I organised my own Twilight Walk, and I had about 50 members of friends and family coming to join me on the day. And I live on the Wirral, so I'm on like a peninsula. So we started at New Brighton, and then we walked 12 miles, and we done it in one day. And looking at the calendar, I thought, wow, this is weird. I said, I've actually planned this to the day that I'm actually doing it, actually marks 12 weeks recovery.
Wow.
So I walked 12 miles to mark 12 weeks recovery.
Nice.
And raised about £3,700 for the Brain Tumour Charity, yeah.
What was it like for you doing that? You were still coming through recovery.
I think, like what you were saying before, did I lose anything through the surgery, or did anything change? And I think for me, more than anything, I obviously lost my confidence, but more than anything, I lost a lot of my strength through like just not moving and not being active. And I worked on that through cancer rehabilitation and stuff, but that was a big fear for me, that I was never like going to be able to go back to karate, or was never going to be able to like lift heavy in the gym and things like that. And me and my mum just started going out on like small walks, because when I first came out of hospital, I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk very far. So for me to walk 12 miles is crazy. But I think organising it, and then getting in touch with the charity, and getting loads of different like fundraising materials, and getting involved with my friends and everything like that, I thought it's actually a really good way for me to start redeveloping that strength, like after CAM rehab and stuff like that. And I think I was still on CAM rehab when I done it. But it was crazy just to be able to experience something like that, and be able to organise something like that as well.
How many of you did it together?
There was 50 of us.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yeah, 50 members of friends and family. But when I finished, I thought, this is amazing. But the second thing I thought was, I really need to go to bed. I'm shattered.
But
but
you did that pretty quick. You've done that really quick. I know you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, because I had it in December 2022, but that wasn't that long ago. So you were doing
No.
things really fast. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're still like, I would say, you're still going to improve from where you are now. It's such a huge shock to the system to have your brain opened and all that stuff. So I think we all think, oh, I'm going to go back to how I was. And we're all a bit like, oh, okay, maybe I was a little bit too optimistic at the beginning. But yeah, I think you'll feel even better. You'll get more confidence as well with your running. And yeah, I think it makes me laugh when I do these interviews for the whole of this Brain Tumour Awareness Month, and the people who are similar kind of times that you've had your surgery, and they're like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm doing really well, and yeah, but I can't do this. And I'm like, you're still fairly newly from having surgery. Like, whoa, you have to give your body a little like time out. Like you will get better. Like already you're speaking, you're moving, you're doing all things that are, thank God you're able to do all those things. I still think you've got time where you're still going to get better. It's not just the way it is now. I really don't think that.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, fingers crossed. When I finished the walk, one of my friends turned around to me and she was like, so what's next for you then, Mel Kelly? She was like, I know you don't do things by halves and all this. And I thought, oh, do you know what? I thought, oh, I might do like a climbing thing next. So basically, when I organised the Twilight Walk, I thought, do you know what? If I'm gonna fundraise, I'm gonna really go for it. And I think I'm still doing that now. So last year, I managed to raise just under £10,000 for various different charities that have helped me along the way. So the Brain Tumour Charities, Teenage Cancer Trust, and Move Against Cancer, which is the can rehab charity that I was talking about before. And I thought, oh, do you know what? And then I went into work when I went back to work, and I said to my boss, because she asked me the same question, she said, oh, what are you thinking about doing next? And I just literally out of the blue went, oh, I don't know, I might abseil the cathedral. Just throwing it out there. She sent me a link and she was like, if you want to do it, I'll do it. And I just thought, oh yeah, go on then, whatever. And just like that, 3 months later, I abseiled the Anglican Cathedral in Liverpool.
oh wow.
I always think like whenever you go through something and you experience something like this, or you put yourself into a position that you think, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this, your mind does some mad thing, and somewhere in there, you've always got that little bit more to give, no matter what it is. So I abseiled the cathedral, and then in September of last year, I trekked the Yorkshire Three Peaks. When I was doing that, I thought, I'm absolutely loving this, but at the same time, I'm also absolutely hating it. But at the same time, I wouldn't have wished to have been anywhere else at that time.
Tell us about the No-Brainer.
It's a No-Brainer is a campaign that's been launched by the Brain Tumour Charities for this year's March Brain Tumour Awareness Month. And they sent out an email and they were asking people that had been affected by a brain tumour or had known someone that had been affected by a brain tumour to go down to London to launch their new campaign of It's a No-Brainer. And basically, It's a No-Brainer is about getting a petition signed to take it to Parliament to basically get a national brain tumour strategy across all 4 nations. And I think this is so important. We've touched on it a few times, and I think more than anything, things need to be done. It's getting to a point now where I don't know whether it's because I've been diagnosed and I'm now more aware of people being diagnosed, or it's actually becoming more of a problem. And I think if that's the case, something needs to be done about it. And it being the biggest cancer killer under 40, I think it's an absolute disgrace. And for me to go down to be involved with the launch of that national strategy really hit home for me. And it made me realise that something has to be done about this. So I was determined to go down to London to be involved and just do whatever I could to get the word out there and to show people that it's a no-brainer, and like time's ticking, and it's sad to say it, but like with time, like obviously you've got to think about people's lives as well, and I think something just needs to be done about it.
Yeah. Is there anyone you want to say thank you to?
I just want to thank everyone, friends, family, my support worker, the Brain Tumour Charities. I could go on, but I think more than anything, I just want to thank people for being there for me and for just believing in me and pushing me to carry on and pushing me to be better and do better for other people. Yeah, I don't know.
Do you know what? I'd be the same.
A random one.
I always think my mum, my dad. I want to thank my dog.
I feel like I'm at the NCAs or something.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you've just come up to do your award. Who would you like to thank? I might say that. I might say that now from now on is when I ask, because I always ask that question at the end. Because I'll tell you what, I know I'm 20 years on from you, but I never said thank you to my parents. Hardly ever. And I didn't mean to not to, but it was just felt like that was a normal thing. And then it was like later down the line, I was like, I never really thanked you. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks for putting me up with my mood swings.
I feel like that's so true, actually. Like, now you've said it like that, I've never actually thought of it like that, but probably my mum. So when I came out of hospital, my mum took time off work, and my mum and dad are both self-employed, so it was hard for them to do that. But obviously somebody needed to be in the house with me, so my mum took that decision and done that. And she took about 9-10 weeks off work, and I remember she'd always wake me up in the morning, and if my dad was in, he'd bring me a cup of tea upstairs and he'd sit with me and ask me questions and see how I was doing. And my dad put like a rail in the shower so I wouldn't fall over. My mum's a hairdresser, and for the first 3 months I was really scared to touch my head and wash my hair, so my mum was doing it for me for 3 months. And I would never have said that, but now you've said I never actually thanked them. It's so true.
But you don't, because it just feels not. You don't, especially like I say, the age you are, and I was the same age. You just don't think about what they've done for us. We just assume it's just part of the process. But actually, it's down the line now. I'm like, oh, you guys really put up with a lot. Like, you really helped me. And I never once said thank you. It was just assumed that was normal. But actually, I think I wish I'd said it more to my mum, but I didn't.
100%. Like, I read something the other day, actually, and it was like, don't argue with your mum and dad. This is your first time as a kid, but it's also their first time being a parent. And that proper stuck with me, because I thought, like, I always say, like, silly things, and I'm always like, I wish leave me alone, like, I'll do it myself, or I'll whatever, just being a typical, like, 20-year-old, basically. But I think, like, everyone's in the same boat. No one has ever been a parent before they were a parent, and I think that must be so hard for them as well, to see not only their child go through something like that, but for them to go through it for the first time, and for it to happen to their child. I think it's such a bizarre concept, but at the same time as me getting used to my diagnosis, they're also getting used to treating their daughter with a brain tumour in a different way. It completely changes so many people's perspectives, but I think that's actually such a good way to look at it. Is I never realised how grateful for my mum and dad I am until I needed them most.
Yeah. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
This is the Aunty M Brain Tumours talk show. It's a show full of informative chat and inspirational messages. The Aunty M Brain Tumours talk show on podcast.